I'm A Town. It's good to meet you and get connected. A little bit about me. I currently co-lead BD on the crypto side of things for Laser Technologies. We are a product studio that helps a lot of big infra providers and other companies, platforms in the space with engineering talent. Prior to that, I was a PM at Foundation building Rodeo last year. And yeah, I've been pretty active on Farcaster for like the last 2 years, and it's just one of my favorite places to hang out on the internet. But little bit background of myself, kind of like way back, starting from the beginning. I'm born and raised in Atlanta. Uh, Immigrant parents, Persian dad, Venezuelan mom. First person in my family, kind of like born in the U.S. who grew up here. So that's a big part of my story. Was just like navigating how to be an American with very non-American parents. I kind of grew up in the suburbs, had a really pretty normal childhood, a lot of fun. Ended up going to Georgia Tech and studying industrial and systems engineering. And that's, I've always been kind of like a math guy. That's really what I love. And yeah, I actually got my career started post Georgia Tech with Home Depot on the supply chain side of things. So I was an inventory analyst, and I really fucking hated that job. And so after 3 months of that, I quit. I moved to California and I worked at a ski resort and snowboarded every day for like a full winter. Lived with a couple of friends in like an A-frame in this little town called Wrightwood, which is like an hour and a half north of LA. It's where all the like surf kids go to snowboard. It's all fake snow, but it was a really good time and just really enjoyed myself there. And ultimately had to come back to earth and grow up, and got back into another like industrial inventory and warehousing kind of job. And I was helping them kind of figure out how to optimally store product to like make it easier to pick our most frequently sold SKUs. And that actually led to me taking over their e-commerce store because our e-commerce manager left. And it was just like a bunch of kind of like country dudes that don't know much about computers. And they were like, this dude knows computers. Let's have him do it. And that's how I started my product career. So, I got into e-commerce there. That was a really good learning experience. And then from there, I started working at a digital marketing agency that did digital marketing for like franchises. So like helping them with lead generation and landing pages and Google Analytics and Google Ads and AdWords, all that kind of stuff. And from there, I worked at another e-commerce provider that was called Purchasing Power, that really was an interesting place because you basically could only use that product if you worked for one of our clients. It was like a e-commerce where you pay with payroll deduction. So you could like buy a fridge, and then we would work with your employer to like take a little bit out of your check for like 2 years to pay it off. So it was really cool because we were serving like a market of people who, you know, lower income or bad credit, but still opening up the ability for them to, really be able to make important purchases in a way that they were comfortable with. And so that really put this notion of like, I don't know, helping the underserved as far as like access to capital and products and stuff. And it was around that time that I really got into crypto. So prior to that, I did buy Bitcoin on eBay in 2013 purely for the access to Silk Road and experimenting on Silk Road. And then I didn't really think about crypto again until about 2017. I read
How did that work, buying it on eBay?
So you buy it like any other eBay listing, and then the person selling it would basically like gave me like a tutorial on how to go create my own wallet. And he was like, send me your wallet address and I'll send it to you, and post the confirmation link here. And that's how it worked. So I paid $60 for like a quarter Bitcoin, and it was in my wallet like an hour later.
So it's just like a trust thing, like anything else. And if they don't send it or send the confirmation, you would like report them to eBay, just like you would report if they didn't send a pair of
Yeah,
shoes or something, and then eBay would probably reimburse you or something.
Yeah, I wonder if eBay would have reimbursed me, but yeah, it's kind of like I was able to do it on the trust system of like this dude had good feedback already.
Right.
Like I would never buy stuff from like a brand new account, but like this guy had a bunch of good feedback, so he's obviously like sending the people what they bought. So that was kind of
Interesting.
cool because in my intro to crypto, I was able to use like a Web 2 like rating paradigm to like make a comfortable decision, which is still something I feel like we don't have a lot of in Web 3 yet.
Yeah, I knew people obviously were using like Mount Gox and doing like Western Union money transfers and stuff like that, but I actually hadn't. Maybe I've heard of it at some point, but at the very least, it is unpopular that I've heard of people getting their start in crypto by buying Bitcoin on eBay.
Yeah, I have the screenshot. I've shared it on Twitter a couple times.
Nice. So then it was what a couple years later, a few years later, that you got sort of started learning about crypto more deeply.
Yeah, it was actually I read the Engine Coin white paper for their ICO, and I wasn't like a huge gamer, but I did understand like the gravity of stuff like Minecraft, and I was like, it would be insane if all these games were able to tap into like some sort of decentralized economy where they could all kind of like share a currency or base their in-game currency on this like external currency where a natural market can form. And I thought that was like the coolest thing. And then I read the VeChain white paper, someone coming from supply chain. I was like, yeah, blockchains are a perfect use case for transparency and supply chain systems, and it would make supply chains run more efficiently. And so those two things really are what put Ethereum on my radar. And I participated in some ICOs, and then kind of like started just like trading crypto with people at work, like other developers and QAs on my team at Purchasing Power. And yeah, I did had a really good trading history with XRP in 2018, and I was trying to buy a house, and I like got so lucky. I like sold all my crypto like a month before the entire market crashed, and I bought my first house with like my whole down payment was just like crypto, profits,
Wow.
which is really cool. Purely
Well,
purely luck, to be honest, as far as timing that you know crash.
was it? I mean, I always am suspect of people who attribute like good things that they've done to luck, because a lot of times it's just like sort of humility. Not that I don't trust you or something, but it's just like it's easy for people to say I got lucky. It's a little bit harder for people to give themselves credit. But are you saying it was lucky maybe because like you just completely independently of market timing, like you decided to buy a house at that time and like it really was just sort of sheer luck, or was there something that some
Yeah,
reason that you might have sold it that might have actually been a bit of not just luck?
I mean, I would say it wasn't luck that I was holding those coins. Like that was definitely like I was doing my research and just like monitoring the market and seeing what people were into. So like the profits I made was definitely just strategy, but the timing on getting out of my positions was, I would have to say, it's just either luck or serendipity, right? Like it
Right.
just so happened that that was a point in my life where I was ready to buy my first house with my girlfriend, and my only like liquid net worth was in these like tokens, and I was like, I mean, this is probably the riskiest asset I own, so let me start here as far as like where I'm going to come up with my down payment, right? Because that's like
Yeah.
the hardest thing for people in that age, the 20s, to come up with is that down payment. And so I just kind of like liquidated all my crypto, and it just happened that the market tanked like a month later.
Wow. And you mentioned like XRP. Obviously, it's been an interesting year or so for XRP. People like it's been one of the it's one of the oldest coins. It's been one of the top coins for pretty much the entire time. But last cycle, it was like not as important or large seeming as it has been so far this cycle. I think like I don't know the latest stats, but I remember looking pretty recently, and it was like trying to remember the market cap was like significantly greater than Solana, which, sort of in my world and maybe in your world, I'm not sure, but just like on crypto Twitter and whatever, like just like way more relevant seeming. And then much more people like sort of building on it and using it and stuff like that, seemingly so at least. And then like for a brief moment, I think the fully diluted market cap, because there's quite a bit of like the difference between the market cap and the FDV on XRP is somewhat significant. The fully diluted market cap or valuation, whatever, was actually flipped Ethereum very briefly. I don't think it's there anymore, but like, bottom line, XRP is like really, really up there right now. I even had on my other podcast, I had the CTO. I actually forget his real name, but his like pseudonym name is Joel Katz on my podcast, and talked with him, and like I sort of understood, Ripple basically, but I don't really understand like what would have led to it like skipping a cycle and why it's so popular now. It seems to be like popular amongst like normies, quote unquote. Did you have any, do you have any thoughts on it now, or any thoughts on it back then as to what got you interested? Given, all the other places you could put your money in crypto, that sounds like it was maybe one of the bigger positions for you.
Yeah, I will say the thing that put XRP on my map in 2017, 2018 was definitely the remittance stuff. Like I have a lot of family abroad, and I'm a very like I just have a lot of like non-American people in my life, in my sphere of life and
Right.
influence. And the idea that people could just like move money cross borders with like fractional fees and in like crazy speed was one of the things that Ripple was kind of like touting as far as their like external comms of how they marketed their chain. And so that's one reason why I kind of like put a lot of money into it. I was like, this could be pretty big. And then, to be honest, like I haven't really kept up with XRP ever since then. So I can't speak to why it didn't really have a presence in the last cycle that we were all in, and or why it's kind of had this resurgence, other than it's so OG that a lot of probably very influential like financial companies probably already had done the legwork to like get exposure to it, like the Robinhoods of the world. And
Right.
so it was just kind of like when the attention shifts back to crypto markets, there's already like ways for people to get exposure to XRP pretty quickly. And then the unit economics of XRP, with it being like sub $1, is just like a psychological thing that people are like, oh, this goes to $1, I'll be rich. And like they don't do the math on it, but like obviously that unit bias is a real thing. And so I think those two things are why probably it has been able to hold its market attention. But like you and I are in a very different crypto sphere than like the XRP army when it comes to like Twitter and how we consume content and what the algorithm's feeding us. So like I couldn't tell you two things about like how someone would go about building in the XRP ecosystem, for instance.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like, I sort of did some diligence on it, like, I don't know, a month or two ago, just because I was like, this is too, like, sort of easily dismissed in my circles with too high of a market cap. Like, something seems like it's going on here, and like, what is that something? And I don't know, like, there are some smart people who have real, who are like really bullish XRP, and then there's just like a bunch of people who maybe don't really have good reasons, or like the unit bias or whatever. Like you said, the unit bias is a funny thing. There's this, I think it was Jacob from Zora has this proposal that he sort of tweets out once in a while of like Ethereum should do like basically the equivalent of like a stock split, where it would make like Ethereum, instead of being whatever it is, like, I mean, it's
just give us
1,500.
all 1,000 ETH per ETH we hold, and then we'll be in a unit of measure that people can get behind. I'm down with it.
We'll finally get to 10,000 per Ethereum if we cut the 1,500 that it is now to 15 cents, then it'll get to $1, and we'll all be set. It's as simple as that.
It worked for Tesla, right?
Yeah, I kind of did, honestly. I messed up. I hate, not that I hate, but I just poured a little salt on a wound that I have of selling Tesla too soon. Several years ago, I had some at a good time and just took like a 2 or 3x and missed like a 20x. But anyway, so we talked about sort of your early days in crypto and how you got there. What are you working on primarily these days? And are you like, I know you started as like sort of math guy, industrial engineer sort of thing. Now, obviously, working with software and crypto for a number of years, are you like coding
Yeah,
stuff up yourself, or are you more of, just like product guy, but not actually coding it up? Like, what's your place and what are you working on?
yeah, I will answer those questions, but I'm gonna start by kind of telling you how I got into really building in crypto. So
Sure.
around like 2020, like coming out of COVID, I discovered NFTs, and I was working at Warner Media at the time, on the data science team there. I had been hired as a PM, a Latin American, for the Latin American market specifically. They were trying to build like internal tooling for the ad sales team to like effectively build lookalike audiences based on like certain demographic attributes, and then forecast their viewership across all of our linear TV inventory, and then like optimize ad sales based on that stuff. And it was really like fascinating, and I got to build a product from the ground up, and it was really cool. But the minute I discovered NFTs, I think my first NFT was an artist named Too Much Lag, who I discovered on Nifty Gateway. I just became obsessed, and I just like could not think about my day job. And I was like trading NFTs 24/7, waking up for mints at like 3 a.m. and just like fully red pilled. And yeah,
Why do you think you got obsessed with NFTs?
um, I think it was just like the community aspect of it. Like I got really into like the Cool Cats community, and I met a bunch of my first friends there and my first clients there. And the idea of just like tokenized like ownership of things was really like eye opening for me. I didn't really like think that art was like going to be the only use case either. It was like a cool use case, and I'm very like culturally driven. Like I'm obsessed with music and art and streetwear and apparel and shoes and all that kind of stuff. And so I saw a lot of benefits there, but I think it was just like how quickly someone can deploy a creation and build a community around it and bootstrap an idea. I thought
Mm.
that was like probably what hooked me in, and just like how much money I was making just like flipping NFTs. Like I remember I sold 2 NFTs like in the middle of my wedding that paid for my whole wedding, and my wife like shouted out NFTs in her like vows to me, and all my friends in the crowd like were whistling and stuff. So it was like really fun time. And yeah, I convinced one of my best friends who I've known since 6th grade. He's like a really dope developer, and he was working at Webflow at the time. Like we both quit our jobs. He quit Webflow, I quit Metaseed, and we started like doing NFT drops for people. And we did like Vinny Hager's in it first NFT drop, and we did Alien Friends, and those two projects really just like blew up, and we were just doing drops every week for like a year. And the two of us, made quite a bit of money in 2022. Um, and yeah, that's kind of how I got my career in like building. But pretty much like I was the client relationship guy and the product guy of like requirements, and then my partner Evan would just build everything. And we did that for like 2 years, and it was awesome. He traveled the world for like 18 months straight, just digital nomad, building stuff from his laptop, and all over the world. And we had a lot of fun. And then the market tanked, and I got the job at Foundation building Rodeo, which again was like really cool. My first time like ever working on like a social network product. And I had a deep understanding of Web3, but I didn't know nothing about growing a social network. And I learned from the other PM who came from Instagram. I learned a lot about like product management from him. So it's a seminal, experience in my career. And then, yeah, I mean, as far as like now with AI and vibe coding, like I've always been frustrated because I feel like I'd be a good developer if I had put in the time to just like practice. But being an industrial engineer, I'm like the most effective use of my time is just like telling other people what I want built and just getting them to build it for me because
Yeah.
I could get my ideas to market much faster that way than doing it myself. And that gap has been drastically, removed with vibe coding. So even now I don't really like launch my own things that I've built, but I can rapidly prototype stuff and convey my thoughts to a developer in a much more structured way now than even before. And that's really unlocking just like a whole nother gear as far as like speed of going from idea to like fully fledged on chain online concept. So that's been really exciting.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel much the same in terms of like where my skills are and the right strategy for building for me personally, where, I don't have any background that's technical. And I also sort of feel like I could have, spent some time learning it and being able to, build more individually. But at this point, I feel like I'm never going to be like exceptional in that realm. And so I might as well focus on my strengths and have developers who can build what I want. And Farcaster actually has been amazing for me in that regard because you basically have a pool of crypto native builders, and specifically I've used like Bountycaster to find tons of great builders who have helped me like bring my ideas to fruition. And that's been really cool. And so I feel like I have, I've done some coding with these, some quote unquote vibe coding with these newer tools. And like I built my personal website myself and things like that. But it's been, I feel like my ideas for crypto products have been too complex for doing them myself, or at least it just would be harder and take a lot more time and sort of not be as efficient or effective, like you said. But I'm curious to hear how you've sort of like, it sounds like you've used vibe coding and the various tools not to necessarily build and release products of your own, but just more so as a effective communication tool for communicating with those, with developers who can then build the thing for you. Is that
I
roughly
would
right?
say
And like,
that
what's like the double click on that process?
I would say it's that, and it's also the ability for me to like vet that something I want to do is actually doable. So I'll give like a concrete example, like because we mentioned 4C earlier. So like 4C was my idea that to basically go from a concept in your head to like a coined piece of content on chain, all from one like user experience. And so it's like you have the command and then the compute to generate it, and then the content gets created, and then the coin. So that's what 4C stands for: is command, compute, content, coin. And yeah, with that one, it was cool because like I was able to use vibe coding to like vet different APIs that I wanted to maybe use in the workflow. And also I knew I wanted to have like this like terminal vibe to it. And so I used V0 to like code what the interface could look like. And I actually like exported that code to the developers, and they used it to build like the terminal that you interact with now. And so
Hmm.
I was able to visualize with V0. I think V0 is like an under talked about tool as far as anyone looking to build some sort of like experience where there is like an interface. You can go to V0 and you don't even need the code really. Like it's just like such a dope rapid prototyping mock-up tool. Like instead of me fumbling around in Figma or like duplicating someone else's Figma mockup and making it my own, like V0, I can just prompt and get a mockup in seconds. And that's been huge for me as far as like thinking through the user experience of something, like the interfaces and stuff. So between that and using Claude, like a Claude project I set up where I just feed it all my context and have it create like PRDs for me, like product requirement documentation. Those two things let me effectively communicate an idea to a developer And like I can go from I had the idea for 4C on a Sunday and it was launched by Tuesday. So it was
Hmm.
like insane, you know. Not to mention the people that built it for me I met on Farcaster. You know, they come from the FBI community and they've been involved with projects like Clanker and a ton of other stuff that has really, you know, come out of the Farcaster community. They're based in Bangalore, India, and you know, just like being able to be connected with prolific builders like that. That now, anytime I do anything, like they're my go-to people that I work with. So it's been really nice that Farcaster and AI have kind of unlocked this position that I'm in now, where I can just tinker on stuff and ship stuff quickly.
Is it FBI broadly, or like a one or two or a few specific individuals? Because I've also built with some people from that community, and it's definitely worth a call out as just like this pretty unreal community of builders on
Yeah,
Farcaster who are,
it's a
based in
couple
India
of
and excited to build.
it's a couple of them who I think have kind of like spun out their own thing called Doc Labs or MakerDoc. I don't know which one they officially go by, but yeah, they kind of came out of that FBI like group of devs, and so I work with like three of them pretty closely.
Nice. And so 4C.law, like where is it now, and do you have like more that you want to do with it from where it is now?
Yeah, it was funny. Like I, you know, was sitting on the couch like a day or two after we launched it, and I was like, I'm just gonna like launch a Clanker token just to test Clanker out and test BankerBot out, and you know, shared that I was gonna associate it to that product, and that was a really cool experience seeing people like you know, that I respect like comment on it in my DMs saying 4C is really cool and buying the token, and so yeah, I mean, I said when I launched it like it's going to be something that I just ship to at my own pace, and I'm always working on 10 things at once, so I can't promise like how quickly anything will come to fruition, but the next idea I'm starting to just like form my opinions on and do research on is coining video content directly from the terminal. Um, so just like looking like monitoring what different models are coming to market that are API based that can do video, and I'd love to be able to do like you know short form Vine style like 10-second video that's portrait, you know, optimized for mobile consumption, that's you know you directly from the 4C terminal created and coined, or even an agent like a social agent on Farcaster that you could like create and coin a video directly from like a tweet or a cast. So that's where I'm currently trying to experiment and hope to ship that at some point. And then beyond that, just kind of going to monitor what people want to do with coins and content, and try to skate to where the puck is.
Are there other, coins or like token launchers that you've been like particularly interested in or active with? Like obviously you launched the Clanker. I don't know if you've been like on Zora. You're obviously building Rodeo. Like there's like a bunch of different, and that's just like base. There's also obviously on Solana and elsewhere. Do you have like a perspective on comparing and contrasting some of these things, or
My
the in-feed launchers versus other stuff, just like sort of a high-level view?
Yeah, I have two like guiding principles on this. One is, as a crypto person, I have found that if you just try everything, you will be rewarded for it. And so oftentimes that really guides like what I'm doing. So, you know, like my good friend Brian just launched JesterBot, which is kind of similar to Banker but on Solana, and so I haven't used it yet, but like the next time I see something in the feed that I want to coin, like maybe I'll test that one out next, right? I think
Right.
just like I've been rewarded time and time again for being an early adopter and trying an app out, you know, like Yapster. When Yapster came out, I played the first game, and because of that, I got the airdrop of that token, and I ended up getting like it was like worth like 10K when I realized it was in my wallet, and I used the app one time, you know, like there's many stories like that of people just testing each other's products out and, you know, getting rewarded with like early airdrops or allocations because you did that. So I'm going to continue to do that for sure. And then, yeah, I'm super fascinated by the in feed activity. Like I'm still debating whether I agree that every piece of content needs to be coined. I do love that Zora's pushing the bounds of like how we define stuff in this space. And when I got the Coins SDK access, like I immediately wanted to build on it. But I do think like even this weekend, I saw a tweet that someone from Coinbase posted, and it kind of like inspired me to want to create an image like related to what they were talking about. And then I was like, I'll also coin it. So I used like ChatGPT to make an image, and then I coined it on Zora, and then I shared it under his reply. And then I realized like because I did that, he's entitled to half the fees. And I was like, this is so cool because like people will be able to comment under non-crypto people's content, like celebrities and influential people on Twitter. And then like if that piece of content goes viral, then that person will realize that they just made a bunch of money and they didn't even do anything other than influence someone else to coin their content, right? And so the in-feed stuff is really cool. And what I love about Farcaster is dealing with the Twitter API is a fucking nightmare and it's really expensive. So you can go prove out your concept on Farcaster first and see if it goes viral there, and that'll help you justify spending what you need to spend and have a similar architecture play out on X, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely the in-feed stuff on X seems like a greater investment, but also, more upside, just like you said, like, for example, if you're going to reply under a tweet and give a share of the fees from the coin trading to whoever you're replying to, like that doesn't really, I mean, I guess it works on Farcaster, but like whoever you're commenting under is going to be a crypto native person themselves. Whereas like you do that on Twitter, there's obviously like a huge number of, highly followed people that are not into crypto at all and could potentially get into crypto if they realize they've made, hundreds of thousands of dollars or whatever from someone launching a coin off one of their tweets.
Yeah, exactly. Like kind of how we saw Caitlyn Jenner discover BankerBot in real time, right? Like we're going to see a lot more of that, I think, start to happen.
Yeah, it's funny. That whole like Caitlyn Jenner thing really, took a lot of the base, especially like the AI coins, but just generally like base coins up quite a bit. And I was like, man, is this really still so small that just like, I mean, obviously Caitlyn Jenner is like pretty famous, but it's just like, is it really so small that like this one celeb can like boost these things by like a lot, just for tweeting a few times or whatever? And it's like kind of, I don't know, I thought it was like kind of relatively low quality content about these things as well. She was just like, I just got this, or I'm just sending this or whatever. Wasn't I? Maybe I missed some stuff as well, but I didn't see like a whole lot of.
No, you're spot on. I think it's with those types of situations, it's just like the fact that eyeballs are hitting it is enough to push the needle, right? And maybe it doesn't lead to retention, but at least people start to realize like the mechanics of how things work. And then, if you inspire the right people to lean into those primitives, then that's where you see the growth. So I think it's more of just like, yeah, the quality may not be great or the engagement may not be great, but just because they're such a massively influential node, that alone just like carries a lot of weight.
And how do you feel about like we talked about, some of the different launchers and whatnot? Do you use or feel certain ways about like Base versus Solana versus anything else? Like, are you happy to use anything or trade on any of them or build on any of them, or you have like certain preferences or views on what makes them different or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I have two kind of like archetypes that I fit under. On the collector slash trader side, I don't give a shit where anything's happening. It's just about where's the liquidity and where's the attention, and I'll go test those apps out. And something like to go outside of EVM or Solana, like there's got to be a really clear value prop for me or opportunity. But yeah, I mean, like I'll trade Solana meme coins, I'll trade NFTs, I'll trade tokens on Base, I'll trade whatever if there's an opportunity. On the builder side, I'm heavily like EVM, ETH pilled. It's just the best builder experience as far as like interoperability and tooling and access to developer talent and 100 other reasons why, like obviously base is crushing it now, but like anything EVM I'm down to build on for all the reasons I mentioned. And obviously Farcaster is heavily EVM leaning, though I know they are trying to invest maybe more into Solana and potentially other protocols. But on the builder side, you just can't really beat the Ethereum experience right now, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think to go with the name of this podcast or the theme of this podcast, one of the core reasons probably why I've been building on Base is that's it's pretty dominant on Farcaster, and Farcaster has sort of become my crypto social network. Obviously, I'm on Twitter or X as well, but not like we talked about. Like Twitter is more of like a just like a broadcast medium for me, whereas Warpcast is actually like sort of engaging with people, finding builders, getting feedback, getting users, all of these sorts of helpful things related to building. That's another sort of reason to add to your list, your number of reasons why, which you mentioned, which I agree with as well. Lastly, it's been kind of interesting in the last whatever year, whatever it's been. We had like sort of big meme coin craze, arguably still going, although obviously a lot has come down quite a bit in terms of market cap and whatnot. But the size of like the market cap of all meme coins is just so far beyond NFTs at this point, which obviously were all the all the craze last cycle, but came crashing down sort of post cycle and have yet to really materially recover. And I know like I actually wasn't really as interested in NFTs back then, like as you were, nowhere close really. Like I've always thought NFTs were cool and interesting, and that they would be really useful and popular long term. But I didn't really get involved with like buying or selling or collecting anything during the cycle. I was just like, yeah, that's really cool. I imagine that 99% of the stuff is going to go to zero, but it's a cool thing. And like some of this will survive, CryptoPunks or whatever. And there'll be new versions in the future that will use this like more interestingly or whatever. And then like actually a year ago, I decided like back at that time, I always thought that I basically thought like the coolest NFT collection would be a collection for every color on the internet. Is like sort of the most, to me, is like the most fundamental element in art. The only other contenders maybe would be like lines or shapes. And these things are like there's arbitrary numbers of different lines you could do, or really infinite numbers of lines you could do, and arbitrary numbers of different sort of like shapes. And similarly, sort of like infinite, but colors have, there's like sort of this universally accepted and acknowledged collection of digital colors, which is the RGB model, which is like hex codes. Most people know them by. And I just thought that would be so cool. And it wasn't practical back then because, it's, if you're going to have every color on the internet, you have to have a supply of like 16 million. And like specifically there's 16,777,216 hex codes. And so if that's going to be the supply, like you're not, each one is not going to be worth very much. And if they're not worth very much, it's pretty silly to pay, $10 or $40 of gas fees or whatever, as it commonly was back then, to buy a $3 or $5 NFT or whatever. But, a couple of years later, Base is live. Obviously, could have worked on some other L2s as well, or potentially other few blockchains. But Base is around. I finally sort of decided to build it. And that's what really got me into NFTs, was like building my own collection with what became Base colors. And I personally, like as a result of that and having collected NFTs a lot more since then on Base, on Solana, I grabbed myself a Milady pretty recently. And having done all of that, like I'm very bullish on NFTs in a weird way, where I think like a lot of people who are bullish NFTs probably became bullish last cycle and have hung on to that bullishness through the bear and everything. I sort of came into it more recently, and I'm just sort of, I still don't, basically like the difference, the way that the market values fungible tokens in aggregate versus non-fungible tokens, it's like orders of magnitude. And the question to me then becomes like, is non-fungibility that, like, is it like a real negative, or is the market pricing fungibility versus non-fungibility sort of incorrectly at this point in terms of the size of the fungible tokens market versus the non-fungibles? And maybe you take out something like a Bitcoin, which obviously like drives the fungible token market cap up by a lot. It's like the vast majority of it. But once you take that out, you like have meme coins versus NFTs, for example, and it's still like crazy different. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on like that, and if you expect NFTs to come roaring back or maybe do so in a different form, or it sounds like that was basically has been the most compelling area within crypto, or at least one of them for you so far. And obviously it's been a little bit of a tough go for the last year with a bunch of other stuff ripping and NFTs kind of staying down. So I don't know what your thoughts are there.
Yeah, I think it's all about the primitive matching the use case. Like there's a time and a place for fungibility, and there's a time and a place for non-fungibility. And a lot of people were trying to force use cases that just don't make sense, especially in the current market. So the ways that I've like the meme coins really struck a chord with me, because I realized that you could join a community for as little of financial exposure as you want, right? Like I could buy $5 worth of Pepe, and now I'm going to bull post Pepe just because I'm a holder,
Yeah.
So that was like a huge unlock as far as why meme coins, I think, took off the way they did, is because everyone can join or gravitate toward any community they want to at whatever level of risk exposure they want to, and it doesn't like one-to-one translate to how bullish they are on that community, like on the timeline. So that's like huge, because you can give people exposure to whatever you're building at whatever level of comfort they have, and now you have a fan. Whereas NFTs, like some of those communities became very hard to join when they were expensive, and so now you have a stagnant, like non-growing fan base and user base. And so that's why we saw a lot of these communities just like hit a wall, and then it's just like a slow bleed from then on.
Sorry to interrupt, but one thing that's interesting, I think, about that is like I generally agree with you, but I think that difference is sort of it's not like a direct result of NFTs versus fungible tokens or meme coins. It's sort of like a secondary thing that has more to do. It's really about the supply size, and it just so happens that the default supply size for NFTs has sort of been 10K, or in a lot of cases less, and you rarely see things above that. But and with fungible tokens, it's like billions or whatever, 1 billion, 100 billion, whatever. And so I feel like it really has to do with more than that. And what I want to see is large supply non-fungible token collections enabled by L2s or blockchains with lower transaction fees. And I think that could enable the best of both worlds, where you have the non-fungibility between tokens, but you also have the accessibility, to your point, to have much larger communities where someone can get involved for $1 or even less.
I agree, and I think the NFT primitive is something that works pretty well with personalization. So you think about like a game where every account that is earning in-game assets or whatever has its own unique ID, and that whole account could be tradable, or real world assets like titles of homes and car pink slips and stuff, like where non-fungibility actually really matters a lot. I think we'll find more use cases for NFTs like that hit the market. Yeah, I've got 2 minutes left. So any like parting questions you have for me?
I would, first of all, appreciate the time. I knew we were running up on your end, so I don't want to go over, but I'll flip it back on you. I don't have any, pressing questions or anything, but maybe if you have parting word or two for anyone listening in, or even just, a reason to check out your profile or what they can expect from you or something, that could be a cool way to finish.
Yeah, I think obviously, like anyone who resonated with anything I said, like you can find me on Warpcast at A-Town or on Twitter at A-Town Brown. I think what I'll do is I'll quote my. If you're familiar with Yuri and the Public Project, like I really like vibe with him heavy and helped him build some stuff recently. And my first public posts, I'll just probably read that out because I think it's a pretty good description of like who I am and what I believe in. So
Yeah.
build dope shit. Go ahead.
Okay. I thought you had to look for it for a second. I was just going to say, while you're digging that up, I also really like the Public Project, but go ahead.
All right, I'm going to recite this. It's build dope shit with dope people, support creators by minting, buying, collecting, and swapping for their work, DM the people you vibe with and give them flowers, share ideas, build in public, and give thoughtful, actionable feedback. Get active.
Love it. I think that's as a good a place to close as any. So appreciate the time, and we'll talk more soon.
All right, man. I'll see you in New York, hopefully. Take it easy.
All right. Sounds good. Talk to you later. Bye.